There are two benches side by side, and then there's an old style bench. Is that a board? I thought about that because
Nicole.
Hello. Nice to meet you. Landscape architect.
I saw what you sent out, and I was impressed.
Yeah.
So, good.
Coming along really well.
Yeah.
Good feedback tonight, and let's move forward.
Yeah.
I'm curious how many people come in on Zoom, and there was a DPW meeting at 4:30, so everyone is coming, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are coming from that meeting to hear after. Yeah. Oh, did you? Were they still meeting?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I
Oh, okay.
How are you?
Yeah.
And she has to tell you that I'm glad they gave you a raise.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad.
Okay, watch yourself.
Yeah.
I second the motion.
I know.
Hi, Rise.
No, that's
Oh, that's downtown. Hi, Rise. Oh, yeah. Wait. What did you do?
Yeah.
I'm really happy about that.
We didn't tell you about that.
Oh, okay.
That's something we definitely have to coordinate with her.
And I don't think anybody was, they don't really need for even.
Yeah.
You can't have full-time employees hired to help take care of those things. Is there a way to include outside contractors?
Yeah. No, that's something that we just have to talk with Parks. Yeah.
Do they collect them out?
Or no?
Right, and they're not necessarily changed, yeah.
I know we kind of come up with the paper down here.
Aren't those white printers around?
It's not helpful, I guess. It is amazing.
Yeah.
And even, you know, working from home, and what you can do from home. See, like, just Google Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
A lot of good site visits.
I know.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
Even just for showing the team, like.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what we've done so much.
Yeah.
Mary, did you see your gardens? That's at least, your garden's right there. At least 3 years old, pretty sad.
Rick, how long have you been with the city?
A little over 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it, it's a good community.
Yeah.
No, I live in the village of Hamburg.
Oh,
My husband works in Buffalo, so we kind of were like middle ground. going against the traffic, you know, it's a quick, you zone out, throw a podcast on, and you're already here, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like-
Never alone in your car. Oh,
Okay.
you do?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you live?
I'm in Rochester. the suburb of Rochester. So our office there. But we're still mostly in the public.
Yeah.
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 She works out of one place, so she's
Oh.
she's a driver. So she's got 3 young kids. She's part of the school.
Yeah.
The days are take longer.
Yeah.
Then you get stuck.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been trying to stagger who's in. I come in 3 days a week and work 2 from home. And staggering staff, so it's been working pretty well.
Yeah.
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 Most of our staff is at home, but we got there.
Mhm.
There's a couple people that are there.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
Looks like it's 5:33.
Yeah, I think I know what I need to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I just, gonna get started here. I want to welcome everyone here to our Fireman's Training Grounds. And today, there's been a lot of excitement about some of the projects that we've been doing in the city. Today, we're gonna be presenting to you the Complete Streets project that we've been planning. When I first was elected, one of the things that we knew right away was that we wanted to develop our waterfront. And that whole corridor, where we have some businesses there, we need to enhance it. And that's exactly what this project is supposed to be doing for us. I want to acknowledge our development team here in the city. They have been working very hard. In my opinion, they've done an excellent job. I'm very proud to be the mayor that has that type of a team in our development department. And I would like to also commend our consultants here. They're going to be introduced to you shortly, but the work that they've put into this presentation today is important for you guys to acknowledge that there's been a lot of time and effort spent behind the scenes. Today, we're here to present it to you, but you're here so that you can give us some feedback, ask questions. That's what today's public presentation is about, to hear the feedback from everyone. So please don't be afraid to ask questions, okay? At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our Planning and Development Director, Rebecca Yanis.
The words here now.
Worcester, I'm sorry.
You're fine. Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor said, this has been a project in the works for a while now. In 2018, we finished our BOA Phase 2 plan, and that included a lot of priority projects on the public side that we could accomplish to really beautify the corridor, beautify our waterfront, and better connect our residents to that waterfront. So our first project was a pier project, and then our second project to go after funding for was a beautification and pedestrian safety project along Lakeshore Drive from Main Street to Brigham Road. In 2018 of August, EJ Hayes did a wonderful job putting in a grant application through the TAP grant, which is the Transportation Alternatives Program. Those are funds that were made available to the state through the Federal Highway Administration and administered through the New York State Department of Transportation. And in April of 2019, the city was awarded $1,477,471 to accomplish this project. So in 2020, we got our contracts with the states, and we officially hired Erdman Anthony and EDR to do our engineering and landscape design for this work. And we've been working with them hand in hand to really create more of a improved safety, beautification, connection to our waterfront corridor. So as you'll see, and as our consultants will describe, we really focus on kind of that Central Avenue area and expand outward. We know that there's a lot of areas that were issues with pedestrians crossing safely. So they've improved a lot of those big zones and areas that pedestrians move about. And then just overall calming the traffic, making the corridor more beautiful, reducing that highway feel, and just making it more inviting to everyone. So from there, I'm going to pass it off to Paul Pursuti and Nicole Reddington. Paul is from Erdman Anthony and Nicole is from EDR. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So what I'm going to do is just kind of present kind of what some of the concepts that we have now. If you don't mind, just so you can hear me, if that's okay. So just talk about some of the concepts, how we got to where we are in the design process, and then kind of what you can expect to see going forward. So when I talk about our design team, look at some of the project elements and kind of describe again how we got to where we did. Look at the project timeline, what to expect during construction, and then open it up to any questions. So the design team, is Erdman Anthony is the prime consultant. So we have a team with EDR. EDR is our landscape architect for the project. So Erdman Anthony, we're more of the engineers. So we look at kind of how things work, how things fit together to make sure they fit together. And Nicole and her team kind of make it look really nice, basically, to put it simply. So our team working with the city, as well as New York State DOT, who's kind of the watchdog of the funds from the Federal Highway Administration. So we work closely with them. And as I'll describe in a little bit, there's kind of a process that we have to go through because of this funding. So we have to make sure, we've done a lot of these projects together. So we kind of know, that's why the city kind of has to hire a consultant, because we've gone through this process a lot. So we really know what to expect, what needs to be done to make sure that funding doesn't ever get jeopardized. So we looked at the key objectives of the project. That's kind of how shaped kind of the project that we formed. So the key objectives, we want to connect the businesses and residential areas to the waterfront Memorial Park, kind of build on what you've already done, basically. And then a key part is to keep it pedestrian and bicycle friendly, and make it a little bit more friendly for people that are walking the corridor. And you'll see how we did that in the slides to come. And then increase activity to the area, the lakeshore area, by making it safer for everyone to be there, making an inviting space for pedestrians, bicyclists, everyone to congregate, basically. So one of the first things to make it a little bit safer is talking about traffic calming. So that's really what it is, to look at kind of slowing down the traffic, make it less of kind of this expansive pavement as you look down. As you look down, you can kind of see just a lot of asphalt, a lot of concrete. And that wide area of asphalt makes vehicles go faster. Basically, it makes it unsafe, a little bit more unsafe for people that are walking the corridor or using bikes along the corridor. So one thing that we're looking at is to provide landscape curb medians along the corridor where we can. We don't want to restrict access and left turns coming out of driveways. We're not looking to do that, but what these islands do is they break up this big expansive pavement, kind of divide it up into each direction of travel. And that narrower corridor kind of makes vehicles slow down. They recognize that it's an area where there could be some activity. It also adds aesthetics to the area where you put landscaping and trees in that median, creates sort of a canopy as you go down the corridor. This is just an example of a project that we worked on. This is in the city of Batavia. You can kind of see it again. Before it looked similar to Lakeshore Drive, that it was a lot of pavement. In this case, there were actually 4 lanes of traffic, so it was a little bit wider. But these islands, you can kind of see how it does create a little bit more of like a boulevard type feel, a little bit more of a residential, a nice area, commercial area, where traffic can go a little bit slower. You can see the aesthetics of the area as well, the pavered median, landscape trees, and other things in that median, but it really does narrow it up and makes vehicles, slow down. So that I mentioned the trees kind of lining that roadway. We're looking at a lot of different areas to add that green infrastructure, those trees along the corridor, kind of create a canopy along the roadway, create a little bit more of a community type feel as opposed to industrial type feel. Again, to keep it more inviting, make it a narrower corridor for vehicles and slow down traffic. This is a project we did in the village of Perry. Same type of thing. We added islands along there, landscaped islands. And in this case, we added a gateway feature as well, an old watering trough that was in some historic photos that they were able to salvage. They used as a planter now. But you can see there's also trees that we planted along the curb offset area, basically right adjacent to the curb, where that area is usually filled with either signs or mailboxes or snow storage in the winter. So we fill that area, kind of have an aesthetic treatment on the surface to give it some aesthetics, but also to kind of identify the walking corridor for pedestrians so that they don't have any conflicts with, in this case, benches, trees, trash receptacles, that kind of thing. Another thing that we're looking at is curb bump outs. There might be 1 or 2 along Lakeshore Drive now, but we're looking at adding them in different spots, key areas along the corridor. We've talked to the city, both Rebecca and EJ, to kind of where are those key points of where people are crossing the street. And there's quite a few crosswalks now, and we wouldn't look to get rid of any of those, but basically to enhance them. You can kind of see, looking at that, what this bump out does. This bump out really reduces the area that it takes for people to cross the road, that length. So especially, older people, pedestrians that are using the corridor that maybe travel a little bit slower. It can be a tough move if it's a really wide pavement section to go from curb to curb. So what these curb bump outs can do is to reduce that space. The other thing they can do is to keep any vehicles that are parked there, give them an offset that they can't get any closer. So it provides a lot more visibility for people that are that want to cross the street. So they don't have to look, kind of sneak between cars. There's a nice area that they can view kind of what's coming. The other thing, we can use these islands, kind of see, we propose a flush area in those islands where it's a refuge. If you get kind of caught in the middle, there's a car coming, you have a space that you're safe in between that traffic to kind of stop and then make the rest of the way, across the rest of the roadway. So those are proposed. So what we did, like in this specific example on Swan Street, where there's a crosswalk on the east side of the road, we kind of move it to the west side of the road so we can utilize that bump out that's proposed. Another thing is to make it safe for bicyclists that are using the corridor. We know that there's already bike lanes from Central Avenue to Main Street, but we continue those to the west. So it basically takes some of that pavement that's pretty wide now, that's used for parking and for the travel lanes. We wouldn't, the plan is not to reduce any of the parking along the corridor, so that's a good thing, you know, for when activity happens along the lake shore. But also to use that space to make a safe space for bicyclists. So it's a designated space. So there's a vehicle space. So we have a median, which would have landscape islands in some areas, left turn lanes in others. Then next to it would be a travel lane for the vehicles. Next to that would be a bicycle lane. Next to that would be a parking lane in the areas where there is parking. One of the focus areas that we were going to look at was between Central Ave and Main Street. You know, that's an area that has a lot of concrete sidewalk. So we'd look to break that up, add some bump outs where we can, and also kind of designate those parking areas, add some landscaping, add some trees, add some vegetation, add some accent paving and pavers along, you know, adjacent to the curb to, again, just increase aesthetics, increase the safety for pedestrians if you're using it, and just the whole experience for people that are using the corridor. This is kind of a typical section. Some of these you can kind of see around the room. You know, there's two sets of them. As well, there's this same plan that I'm kind of cutting out different pieces of in this presentation. You know, that the entire plan is shown same image on the wall here and then on the table there. You can kind of look at afterwards. They kind of show just a concept, and that's important to note. With all this is that we're basically in the concept stage. We're in our preliminary design. And so, you know, any decisions, you know, that's why we're having the meeting with you now, is to get feedback and to take that forward. What you see now isn't set in stone. It's not going out to the contractor right away to build it. You know, we're looking for ideas, any kind of thoughts you might have. We'll take that back and kind of redo our design to make sure it meets everybody's needs. So in this section, you kind of see what we have proposed, kind of what I described. In this specific area would be in a bump out area where we might have an island. We have a little offset to that island. We have our travel lane, bicycle lane, and then the curb bump out. In this section, same type of thing, except there's parking. So there's the median island, a little offset, the travel lane, bicycle lane, and then the parking lane. In some areas, kind of the curb varies a little bit throughout the corridor. So where possible, we want to create a little bit of an offset for the bicycle lane. And lots of times you'd put that next to the parking lane just for any, you know, open doors, you know, so that there aren't those conflicts. So we want to make sure it's safe for everyone, especially bicyclists that might see unexpected conflicts. So that's where we put that space if we had it, where we have it. So this is just an example of one of the projects, and what I wanted to show here is kind of what effect some of these things have that I'm describing. So if you look, this is added, in this area, we added bump outs, we added some landscaping, we added, kind of defined where that parking area is, but you can kind of see how the corridor kind of narrows up and has a more aesthetic feel. So just kind of go back and forth. You can kind of see what that does. I mean, that's the kind of concept that we're looking to achieve with all this. So EDR did some visuals for us to kind of show the same thing of what could happen along our corridor, along Lakeshore. And this is, I believe, at Central Avenue. And so the same type of thing, where we kind of bring in that curb line a little bit. We still have the travel lanes in each direction. We have a bicycle lane. In this case, there's a left turn lane and then a traveling through lane. But you can kind of see some of the brick pavers that we would, you know, kind of accent the sidewalk with. Some of the grass, the trees, to kind of see what that does. And just another example, and this one is to kind of show what an island might do. Not that we would do it at this location because it does have a left turn lane, but I just kind of wanted you to get the feel of what kind of that island might provide and how it really does narrow up that section. And you can kind of see the really big difference it makes from having all this asphalt and concrete to adding some vegetation, some bump outs, those kind of things to really provide, again, to slow down vehicles, to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists to use in the corridor. I mentioned we really want to invite people to all the areas of interest. So we want to make connection to all the businesses, park, the waterfront, the new pier along that project. We'd want to incorporate some of the schemes that were used there and coordinate it into our project. So we want to make sure everything's all continuous. We invite people to go to these locations, all that kind of stuff. But we really want to make it a consistent look and feel. So some of the things, we really are focused on the infrastructure. So things that we can't be added later. So the big things that we focus on are median islands and bump outs and, that kind of thing. But as money allows, there is a good amount of money in the project. So as money allows, and we kind of, the way our approach is that we're looking at cost estimates as we go through the design. So if there's extra money and there is money available, we really would like to add these corridor enhancements, like that can create this sense of identity. Different things like different signs, interpretive signing, wayfinding, those kind of features. These are some things that we've included on other projects that are simple and they aren't too expensive. So where we can add them to add, benches, a place to sit, trash receptacles to keep it clean, bike racks so someone can rest their bike when they need to and lock it up. Same thing, a bulletin board. These kind of things are things that can be added for, relatively low cost, but as funds allow in the project, we definitely want to include those kind of features. And this is another example, one we did in the city of Rochester where, it kind of creates that village feel. This was a gateway feature at the beginning of the project. There's an opportunity definitely here on the east and west end to create something maybe in the median, maybe along the edge. But as people come into this corridor, again, to kind of signal that you're coming into an area of interest. Some other things that we've done, EDR worked in the village of Webster to kind of create a gazebo, again, more of a gateway type feature. Same thing I had mentioned before about the village of Palmyra, that watering trough with a big granite, thing. So you can kind of incorporate different features from the area and different things we want to identify and add them to gateway features or, wayfinding, any kind of interpretive signing, things along the corridor to kind of make it your own. Other things that we will look at, again, as money allows, is, we want to make sure it's safe. And we know some of these crosswalks, they do get very busy, when there's concerts and other things going on at the lake. So safe pedestrian crossings. One of the things that we could look at are, these dynamic signs that when you push a button, it kind of a strobe light goes on. So it identifies to vehicles that are going by that there is someone that could cross the street. Up to the, this is kind of the extreme example where there's actually a signal for pedestrians. And that can be kind of turned off and on during big events or, so we can kind of control that. But, those are different things that we might look at to make sure, again, we want to make sure it's safe for everyone that's using the corridor. So as far as the timeline, kind of where we are in the project, we are in the preliminary stages, so we're open to any comments. I had mentioned kind of the formality that we have with federal money and with the New York State DOT as the kind of watchdog for that money. There's an environmental process that we go through. EDR is actually doing that for us as well. And we're looking at kind of doing a screening of make sure that what we're proposing isn't going to have any negative environmental impacts. So they're going through that now. The DOT, working kind of with the DOT to get that approval process. So we're doing what's called a design report. So that's that. And when that's approved, that kind of signals the end of our preliminary design, and then we move into the final design. When we're done with that preliminary design, that's when we have a project concept that we're going to go forward with and start creating plans that we can make to have a contractor bid on that set of plans. So we anticipate to obtain the end of the design approval, maybe in a couple of months, definitely by the end of the year. And then that we'd go into final design, and then we bid the project sometime in the springtime, in early springtime is what we're thinking, or late winter, early spring. So that the contractor can get going, when the weather gets nice, basically. So as far as construction and what you can expect, we don't expect there to be any kind of detour along the corridor. A lot of the work is either, right in the middle of the road, so we can stage it so that vehicles can use either side of it, and the contractor will be working in the middle, or it's along the curb line, and we can again stage traffic so that it can avoid those impacts. So traffic would be maintained, throughout construction. Not to say that there won't be, a lot of construction vehicles and things going on, but we try to minimize that, and again try to avoid any big events that might be going on. We have those kind of things written into our contract, so when there's a big event, we identify certain dates that the area has to be cleaned up and free of machinery, so that there aren't any impacts and safe for anyone that's going to be walking around with heavy crowds. And also because there's it's a big commercial corridor, so we want to make sure that there's access for everyone during construction. That's tricky at times with especially if there's sidewalks that need to be done. But usually contractors, we write that into the contract that the contractor has to maintain access. That we have, we would have inspectors full-time on the project. So our inspectors really work closely with all the business owners to make sure that we time everything so it's a minimal impact to those business owners. And we've had good success with maintaining that relationship throughout construction, so that it really, again, minimizes that impact and makes it as painless as possible. That's all I have as far as the presentation, so I'll open it up to questions. Yeah.
No matter what the final design is it likely that all of the existing sidewalks will be torn up and redone on both sides between of Lakeshore Drive? I mean, would you be keeping any of the existing sidewalks, or you would be keeping some?
Yeah, because of the funding. I mean, with all these projects, we have limited funding, and so we are doing probably even next week or the week after. We're going to do an analysis of all the existing sidewalks to see kind of what's serviceable, what can be saved, what has to be replaced. Okay. So if you can put it this way, if we were to have to do all the sidewalks along, it takes a lot of that aesthetic stuff out of it, because we just can't afford to do everything. Right. As much as we'd like to, and I'm sure the city would also. But
which goes into my second concern.
Sure. That
I think one of the biggest barriers to aesthetic improvements in that area are the overhead power lines and utility poles and things. They're ugly.
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult to find places where there's enough room for trees to be planted because of the overhead power lines. So I'm assuming that you'll be addressing that, or taking into account, how you can space out trees attractively in that area with the overhead power lines.
Yeah, right on the south side, they are quite low, so anything we proposed there would be a smaller tree, like a tree lilac or crabapple, something like that, that's very low and not gonna, grow around the power line.
Yeah, and then the center islands look fairly narrow where you'd be planting trees, so they have to be fairly small trees, I would gather.
That too. Yeah, initially we're thinking something columnar. I know you have a garden, so you probably know plants, but like a columnar European beech, something like that. So it has to be columnar, fit the shape. It also has to be able to take the salt and pollution.
And I was thinking about enough room for the roots too, just in such a narrow space. So
yeah, the tree islands aren't that narrow.
9 feet.
About 9 feet. Yeah, so that's pretty generous for a street tree.
Okay.
Yeah, so that they should be able to do well there.
Thank you.
With that kind of.
And please correct me if I say anything wrong, but I know that, we often find this in city projects and even village projects, with that there's utility poles along there, and, obviously we can't address that as part of the project. But, I think one of the concepts is to kind of brings people's focus down to a smaller tree,
Mhm.
you know, maybe even some like decorative lighting in certain locations so that you're bringing people's eye level down away from those utility poles and down towards the more eye level, basically. So that's one thing. And then another thing, you know, that I know that we've used typically with street trees and with median trees, there is a special planting mix that we use to try to improve that and, you know, make sure that enough water gets to these trees as well. That's another thing that. Yes.
So speaking of water, I was wondering, how much permeable paving material will be involved with this? That, you know, would allow stormwater or rainwater to be absorbed into those medians, what have you. The second part of that question is, it'd be really great if you had all these permeable pavers in the medians, then you don't have plantings. But if you have plantings, then you have a City of Dunkirk Parks Department maintenance issue to tend to those flower beds, mow that grass, whatever. And I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think that's a particular issue now in terms of manpower. So it's a balancing act that I guess you have to plan. Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's
I guess
probably.
it's really a Nicole question.
It is, but I will say it's probably, you know, more as we move into final design. This preliminary design is, I mean, it's a great point to bring up, definitely, and we'll look at that. But as we design those medians, I think the big thing now is to kind of look at where we can put them. Generally, kind of what are the proposed features, and we know we want an island here. What that actually consists of, you know, that's the kind of the next step. And we definitely have some conversations with the city and even Parks Department too, to kind of see what works. You know, we want it to be something that is nice now and then also 5 years from now, you know, so we want to make sure that that's the case. We could use, you know, some things that we have done on other projects is to have just trees with permeable asphalt or some kind of material that's permeable in that median, so it's really maintenance free for the most part.
Yeah.
So those are things we'll look at. And there might be areas, I guess to that point too, there might be certain islands, maybe, you know, one on either end or something like that we, you know, that's the one we keep nice and has a lot of land plantings and things in it. And then the other ones are a little bit maintenance free and not as much there, but they still provide that separation that we want.
Another question?
Okay.
How will bike lanes be delineated? Right now, what we have are sharrows and some signage in the existing bike lanes on Central Avenue. With the use of color to help delineate those bike lanes, make it a little more safe. I've seen communities where you see this sort of chroma key green striping and entire lanes just blacktop with this green.
Yep. So the one thing I can say about that, I think, you know, as we move forward, you know, it's all about priorities and trade-offs. You know, that does add expense to the project, but there's things you can do, like some of the things we've done on other projects is you include that green striping for the first, I don't know, 20 feet or so from the intersection. And then it, you know, it goes back to just 2 white stripes kind of, and with bicycle symbols that you would typically see. But then at key points, maybe like at the crosswalks or, you know, I don't know, points that make sense, you'd have a little strip of that green.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You mind if I pull this down briefly? She's a family member, so.
Okay, yeah, if she doesn't mind, it doesn't bother me, yeah, that's right.
I suspect you've already, you know, are considering these things, but back to the median concept, I'm curious about the existing infrastructure beneath the highway, if there's water lines, sewer lines, and, looking ahead into the future, when repairs need to be made, and if you could comment on that briefly.
Yes, so part of our survey, we did obtain all the record plans for any utilities that are underneath the roadway. We will look, because curb bump outs are a big thing, especially for drainage. You don't want to stop up drainage when there might be a catch basin there at the corner. Now we have to relocate that. So that's things we definitely look at. But all the underground utilities too, we make sure that, to see what we're impacting. And then at some point, once we get what we call like our 75% plans, advanced detail plans, we have a utility coordination meeting with all the utility companies that are in the area to talk about those impacts. Generally with this kind of project, if the utility's within the highway boundary, they have to move their equipment if it's in our way. So we have to coordinate that. But then also as far as future maintenance, sometimes, we locate like valves and things so that they might be in a landscaped area so that it's easy to get to and not cover it up with pavers or whatever, but try to make it as easily accessible as possible. So we definitely take those utilities. I mean, that's a big part of our design, is to make sure that we kind of minimize that impact. One, because even if they have to be relocated, that can delay the project because it takes the utility companies a long time to do that work. But then also we want to make sure that we're, making it accessible to the companies. Yep. Sure.
The other question I have has to do really with traffic flow in a few spots. And again, I'm sure you've probably heard about these already, perhaps. But the East End intersection, Main and Lakeshore Drive, where the Tim Hortons is. And a lot of times you get traffic, cars backing up on the North Main Street section. And if it's not really the Lakeshore Drive corridor, it's just off by, a few feet. And so, if anything can be done to mitigate, that, because a lot of times, sometimes people that are waiting on North Main Street will pull to the right-hand side. Sometimes they will block traffic as they're waiting to get in. Sometimes they'll be along the center area. So if there's some way to standardize their movement, would be nice.
That's all great information. That's the kind of information we really like to get at these events. So if you could afterwards, if you can come show me that too, we can talk about it a little bit more.
And the other area that came to my mind is the Eagle Street intersection, or where it comes out because of the fire service. The fire station is just down the street, and they're going to have to get their big trucks, including the ladder truck, and they're going to have to be able to make that turn.
Right.
And the other question is, and slap my hand for saying this, but is there any thought on state DOT in the future looking at roundabouts?
That I don't know. We can ask the DOT. We do have a DOT liaison for the project, and I can ask him.
I'm not for or against. It's just that you go through all of this trouble. If they're going to come out, and it's a rather divisive concept everywhere, it seems, anyway, until people get used to it.
Mm-hmm. I happen to be a big fan of roundabouts, but they do increase, improve safety of an intersection. There's no doubt. They are kind of a divisive thing with certain communities. I've gone through presentations like this where we're introducing a roundabout, and we've kind of had some opposition, but then there's usually a lot of people that have been used to using them and support them. So I don't know if there's been any talk about it. I could see, at some of those intersections, it might make, the bigger ones, it might make sense, but I don't know if there's any thought to that. I don't know. But
Especially reducing traffic lanes to one way in each direction.
Right. Yep. Yeah, the big thing that those roundabouts do is they just minimize the conflict points. You don't have, you have less accidents altogether, but even if you didn't, the severity of those accidents goes down significantly because you don't have people taking a left turn and then someone coming at them. So those 90-degree accidents, those are the ones that really, those crashes really are the ones that cause a lot of injuries and fatalities, unfortunately. So those are totally gone with the roundabout, really.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Okay.
About 25 years ago, the state came in and said, on Lakeshore Drive, we're gonna have to take away some of your land in front of the businesses all the way down to right up Lakeshore Drive from Main Street to, just past Eagle. Why now all of a sudden change that necessity is not there? Traffic is not diminished. My husband was we had a business down there.
Okay.
He worked at a business there, and we had to pull out shrubbery and move. It was a car lot. They had to take away the frontage for displaying vehicles on the roadway because they went in on both sides of the street. All the way down. Why now the change?
I don't know specifically because I don't know what that project was. The thing that I can say is that I know over, let's say from 25 years ago, there's definitely been a different direction for the DOT for their projects. I think that there used to be more of a philosophy. We have to make it, mobility is the big thing. We got to make sure that we can get as many vehicles through this corridor as possible and make it, like we look at level of service at different intersections that might have a traffic signal. So we want to be able to get as many cars through that intersection as possible. That's not necessarily the mantra for DOT now. While they do want to make sure that vehicles can still get through the corridor, but they want to make sure it's a complete streets policy, so they really want to make sure that it's safe for anyone that uses that corridor. So they're putting bicycles and pedestrians at the same level as vehicles. Whereas it didn't used to be as big of a concern, probably, and they put vehicles much more to the forefront for these projects. So you had projects that were adding a lot of lanes, adding width to roadways, whereas now we're adding sidewalks, adding bicycle lanes, that kind of thing, and narrowing up the road so that it slows down those vehicles, because they found that you make these big wide roadways, people go way too fast, there's conflicts with all these pedestrians that are trying to use it, and it causes issues. So there is a definite change in philosophy, no doubt.
Right along the rails down there by the lake, by Memorial Park, there is the whole width around a bicycle path already, and many people do utilize that. So there is not really a need to have a second bicycle path.
Well, I think that along this corridor, we aren't really looking to change any curb lines. Any traffic that's uses it now can use it once the project's done. So we aren't really changing the nature of it or the number of vehicles that can get through the corridor. So to me, it's not. I don't think that we're changing how many vehicles can use the corridor or anything. We're just adding a level of safety. I think adding that bicycle lane for anyone that does use the roadway. It's significantly safer if they have their own space and vehicles are moved over away from that where the bicycle might be, instead of just sharing this big wide lane. So I think it's all to increase safety for everyone that uses the corridor. Because if there is an accident or if there is a crash with a pedestrian and a bicycle, it's usually pretty bad for that pedestrian or bicyclist. So the severity of that is quite high compared to if it's just vehicles.
I just have to ask you, are you from Western New York? Have you spent winters in Western New York?
What's that? Say it again.
Have you spent winters in Western New York?
Yes, I have my whole life. Yep.
Is some consideration going to be used for like truck traffic in that area, like 18-wheelers like that, because there is a significant amount of truck traffic?
Yes. So the pavement width. So when we do our design report, and kind of check off all those boxes for DOT. One of them is to look at what's called our design criteria for the roadway, and based on what kind of road it is. Is it on the national highway system? Is it a qualified roadway? All these different kind of nomenclatures for the type of roadway. And they all have to do with the amount of trucks and, so that pavement width, that travel lane width is based on how many trucks are expected to use the corridor. So yes, that is taken into consideration. Yep. Any other questions? All right. Oh, yep.
Did you work on the islands by University of Buffalo and Main Street?
We did some work on Main Street, near the university. I don't think they were the ones near the university, no. We did some, and near the subway station, we did some work there. And a lot of that Main Street we did work on. And then the city of Lockport, we did that Main Street as well. So we've been around the area, but not that specifically. So we will, Nicole, myself, and the city will be here, if you want to ask any questions, take a look at the materials and, we'll be here.
Thank you. And anyone at home, if you have any questions, please email myself or EJ Hayes at the City of Dunkirk and we can get your questions answered.